The slap echoed through the crowded cafe like a gunshot. Cole Mitchell sat frozen, blood trickling from his split lip, while his 8-year-old daughter, Nia, watched with trembling hands wrapped around her hot chocolate. The black single dad's deep brown skin contrasted sharply with the stark red at the corner of his mouth. The bully named Derek laughed, circling his prey like a wolf sensing weakness. "What's wrong, old man? Too scared to fight back in front of your little princess?" Every customer looked away. No one moved, but something shifted in Cole's eyes. Something cold, something calculating, something that hadn't surfaced in 5 years. His dark brown, calloused hands, the same hands that built wooden furniture and gently parted and braided Nia's tight curls every morning, now rested perfectly still on the table. Derek saw a coward. He didn't see the ghost. He didn't know that those quiet hands had once ended threats far more dangerous than him in the shadows of Fallujah. And he certainly didn't know that touching Nia would be the worst mistake of his life. Saturday morning, sunlight streamed through the windows of Rosie's cafe, painting golden rectangles across worn wooden tables and checkered floors. The smell of fresh coffee and cinnamon rolls drifted through the air, mixing with the gentle hum of conversation from the dozen or so customers scattered throughout the small establishment. An elderly couple shared a newspaper in the corner booth, their coffee cups leaving rings on the laminated menu they had stopped reading years ago. A young mother wrestled with a toddler and a stack of pancakes near the back, her patience wearing thin, but her smile still intact. This was the heartbeat of small-town America, the kind of place where everybody knew everybody and strangers were noticed immediately. Cole Mitchell sat in his usual booth by the window, the one with a cracked vinyl seat that nobody else ever wanted, watching his daughter Nia carefully arrange the marshmallows in her hot chocolate into what she called a snowman family. Her small fingers worked with intense concentration, tongue poking out slightly as she positioned each puffy white piece with surgical precision. The morning light caught the rich dark coils of her hair, turning them into a soft halo around her warm brown face, and Cole felt the familiar ache in his chest that came from loving something so completely it terrified him. At 45 years old, Cole looked like exactly what he appeared to be, a black single dad and working man with calloused hands and tired eyes. His flannel shirt was faded but clean, his jeans worn soft from years of sawdust and sweat. There were scars on his hands that he told people came from woodworking accidents, and that was true enough for the recent ones. The older scars, the ones that ran along his knuckles and up his forearms, those had different stories. Stories he never told. The gray streaking through his dark hair had appeared almost overnight 5 years ago, right around the time his world collapsed into itself. Friends said it made him look distinguished. Cole thought it made him look exactly as old as he felt. He ran a small woodworking shop on the edge of town now, crafting custom furniture for neighbors and the occasional city client who wanted something rustic and authentic. His hands, which had once disassembled and reassembled weapons in complete darkness, now shaped oak and walnut and cherry into tables and chairs and cribs. It was honest work, quiet work, the kind of work that let him be home when Nia got off the school bus every afternoon. That let him pack her lunches and help with her homework and read her stories until she fell asleep. On a shelf in his shop, a framed photo of a beautiful black family. Cole, his wife Simone, and a toddler Nia with her curls in tiny puffs, watched over the sawdust and tools like a promise he refused to break. Nia looked up from her marshmallow creation with a gap-toothed grin that still managed to stop Cole's heart every single time. She had her mother's deep brown eyes, the kind that caught the light and seemed to hold whole stories inside them, and her mother's stubborn chin, Simone's chin, the same chin that had argued with him about everything from what color to paint the nursery to whether he should accept that final deployment. She had won that argument. She always won those arguments with her logic and her love and that look she gave him that said she knew exactly who he was and loved him anyway. And then 3 months after he came home from his last mission, a drunk driver ran a red light on Highway 12 at 2:30 in the afternoon, and Simone was gone, just like that. No warning, no chance to say goodbye, no final words or meaningful last moments. She had been on her way to pick up Nia from daycare. Cole had been in the garage building a rocking horse for their daughter's 3rd birthday. He had been sanding the curve of the neck when the doorbell rang, and somehow he had known even before he opened the door and saw the 2 officers standing there with their hats in their hands. He had known, and his whole world had ended between one heartbeat and the next. The rocking horse still sat in the corner of his workshop, unfinished. He couldn't bring himself to complete it, and he couldn't bring himself to throw it away. Simone would have understood. Simone had understood everything about him, even the parts he tried to hide. "Daddy, look." Nia held up her cup triumphantly. The daddy snowman is the biggest because he has to protect the baby snowman from the hot chocolate ocean. Cole felt something crack in his chest, the way it always did when Nia said things like that without knowing how deeply they cut. He reached across the table and tucked a springy curl behind her ear, his rough fingers impossibly gentle against her soft cheek. "That's a very smart daddy snowman," he said quietly. "He's lucky to have such a good artist, making sure he's strong enough for the job." The bell above the cafe door jingled, and Cole's eyes flicked automatically toward the entrance. An old habit from another life, one he couldn't seem to shake no matter how many years of peace piled up behind him. His body registered the threat assessment before his conscious mind caught up. 3 men, young and aggressive, the leader displaying dominance behavior, the follower showing signs of intoxication and nervousness. In another life, Cole would have cataloged exit points, improvised weapons, optimal engagement distances. Now he simply noted and returned his attention to his daughter. Old habits die hard, but they can be managed. 3 men walked in, their voices too loud for the sleepy Saturday morning atmosphere. The one in front was young, maybe late 20s, with the kind of swagger that came from never having faced real consequences. He wore expensive sneakers that had never seen an honest day's work, and a gold chain that caught the light when he moved. His face had that soft, entitled look of someone who had always gotten what he wanted, one way or another. His 2 companions flanked him like satellites, smaller and quieter, their eyes darting around the room with the nervous energy of followers who weren't quite sure they wanted to be following anymore, but didn't know how to stop. Cole turned back to his daughter, but something in his peripheral vision kept tracking the 3 men as they approached the counter. Maggie, the young waitress who always snuck Nia extra whipped cream, stood behind the register with her customer service smile firmly in place. She couldn't have been more than 22, working her way through community college one double shift at a time. Cole had built a bookshelf for her apartment last month, refused to let her pay for it. She reminded him of his younger sister, the one who lived in Portland now with her own family. "Hey, sweetheart," the man in front said, leaning against the counter with practiced casualness. "How about you give me your number along with that coffee?" His voice carried across the small cafe, designed to be heard, designed to establish territory. Maggie's smile flickered but held. "Just the coffee today, sir. What size would you like?" The man laughed, and it wasn't a pleasant sound, playing hard to get. "I like that." He reached across the counter and touched her arm, his fingers lingering on her skin. Maggie stepped back, her face going pale. "Sir, please don't touch me." Cole's hand stopped moving. Nia was telling him something about school, about her friend who had a new puppy, but the words washed over him without registering. His attention had narrowed to a single point, the space between the man's hand and Maggie's arm, the fear in her eyes, the way she had nowhere to go with the counter behind her. He knew he should stay seated. He knew that getting involved in other people's problems was a good way to create problems of his own. He knew that Nia was watching, and he knew, as a black man in a small-town cafe, that stepping into someone else's scene could go bad in a dozen different ways. But some lessons were more important than safety. Cole stood up slowly, the motion drawing the attention of half the cafe. He wasn't a particularly tall man, maybe 6 feet in his work boots, but there was something about the way he moved that made him seem larger than his physical space. He walked toward the counter with the unhurried pace of a man who had learned that speed wasn't nearly as important as intention. "Excuse me," he said, and his voice was soft, almost gentle. The lady said, "No." The man turned, irritation flashing across his features before settling into amusement. "Mind your own business, old man. This is between me and the pretty girl." Cole positioned himself between Maggie and the three men, his back to the counter. "She asked you not to touch her? That makes it my business. That makes it everyone's business." The cafe had gone completely silent. Cole could feel the weight of every eye in the room, could feel Nia's gaze burning into his back from their booth by the window. "I think maybe you boys should get your coffee somewhere else today." The man's amusement curdled into something uglier. He stepped closer, close enough that Cole could smell the stale alcohol on his breath, the remnants of whatever party had carried him through the night. "You think you can tell me what to do? You know who I am?" Cole didn't blink. "I know what you are, and I'm asking you nicely to leave." The man's face twisted and his hand came up fast, faster than Cole had expected from someone who moved like he'd never had to fight for anything in his life. The slap connected with Cole's cheek, snapping his head to the side. He tasted blood where his lips split against his teeth. The cafe erupted in gasps and the scraping of chairs as people moved away from the violence. Cole heard Nia cry out, "Daddy!" and the sound nearly broke his careful control. He turned his head slowly back to face the man who had just struck him. And he made a choice. He chose to stay still. He chose to bleed. He chose to let this man think he had won. Derek Hollis stared at Cole with a mixture of contempt and confusion. He had expected fear. He had expected groveling. What he got instead was nothing. Cole stood perfectly still, blood trickling from his split lip, his eyes fixed on Derek's face with an expression that was completely blank. It wasn't the blankness of shock, it was something else, something that made Derek's companions shift nervously. "What's wrong, old man?" Derek heard himself say. "Too scared to fight back in front of your little princess?" He jerked his chin toward Nia. Derek laughed, the sound too loud. "That's what I thought. Just another coward pretending to be a hero." He turned to Maggie. "See that, sweetheart? No one's going to save you." Cole's voice cut through the cafe like a blade. "My daughter is watching." The words were quiet, almost conversational, but something in their tone made Derek's spine stiffen. "I need you to understand that. My daughter is watching everything that happens in this room, and I need her to learn the right lessons today." Derek snorted. "What lessons? How to be a pathetic pushover?" "No," Cole said, his voice unchanged. "The lesson that strength isn't about hurting people. The lesson that a real man knows when to stay his hand. The lesson that there's always a choice." He reached up slowly and wiped the blood from his lip. "You're going to leave now. You're going to take your friends and walk out that door, and you're going to think carefully about the kind of man you want to be." Derek felt the rage building, hot and familiar. "You don't tell me what to do," he spat. "You know who my uncle is? He's the sheriff of this whole county. One phone call and your life becomes hell." He stepped closer to Cole. "So maybe you should think carefully about what you say next." Cole's expression didn't change. "I'm going to go back to my daughter now," he said. "I'm going to sit with her and finish our Saturday breakfast." He started to turn away and something snapped in Derek. He grabbed Cole's shoulder, spinning him back around. "Don't you walk away from me, old man. I'm not done with you." And that was when Cole's hand moved. It wasn't fast, not the way Derek had expected. It was economical, precise. Cole's fingers wrapped around Derek's wrist and twisted, and suddenly Derek was on his knees. His arm bent at an angle that sent white-hot lightning shooting up to his shoulder. He tried to cry out, but Cole's other hand had found his throat. Not squeezing, not yet, just resting there with pressure that suggested everything. The whole movement had taken less than 2 seconds. "I gave you a choice," Cole said, voice still soft, still gentle, still devoid of emotion. "You chose wrong every single time." He leaned down, bringing his face close to Derek's, and for the first time Derek saw something in those gray eyes, something old and cold and patient, something that had seen worse things than Derek could imagine. "My name is Cole Mitchell. Some people used to call me the Ghost. I spent 15 years making problems disappear for the United States government, and I was very good at my job. I retired, because I wanted to be a father more than I wanted to be a weapon. But the weapon is still here. It's always here. And right now, it's the only thing standing between you and a very educational experience about human anatomy. Derek couldn't breathe. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't know." Cole's grip tightened. "You're not sorry that you hit a man who wasn't fighting back. You're not sorry that you threatened my daughter. You're sorry because you're scared now, and scared is the only language you understand." Nia's voice floated across the cafe, small and uncertain. "Daddy?" Cole closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, the cold thing behind his gaze had retreated. He released Derek. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stand up. You're going to apologize to Maggie. You're going to walk out that door, and you're never coming back here again." Derek scrambled to his feet, clutching his arm. His companions had already backed toward the door. Swagger evaporated. Derek stumbled toward the exit. The door slammed shut and the bell jingled cheerfully. Cole walked back to the booth on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. Every eye in the cafe tracked his movement, but he couldn't focus on any of them. All he could see was Nia's face, the way she was looking at him like he had suddenly become a stranger wearing her father's skin. He slid into the seat across from her, his movements careful, trying to shrink himself back down to the safe and ordinary man she had known for 8 years. "Hey, sweetheart," he said softly. "It's okay. Everything's okay now." Nia didn't say anything for a long moment. Her small hands were wrapped around her cup, knuckles white, the remnants of her marshmallow family drifting aimlessly in the cold chocolate. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Daddy, your lip is bleeding." Cole touched his mouth, felt the sticky warmth there, and grabbed a napkin from the dispenser. "It's just a scratch, baby. Nothing to worry about." But Nia's eyes stayed fixed on the red stains spreading across the white paper, and Cole knew that nothing he said right now would make this moment unhappen. The cafe door burst open, and 2 uniformed officers walked in with their hands already resting on their belts. The older one scanned the room with practiced efficiency, his gaze settling on Cole with a flicker of recognition. Officer Jim Patterson had been on the force for 23 years, and he knew trouble when he saw it. What he saw right now didn't add up. The blood on Cole's lip, the shattered look in the little girl's eyes, the way the other customers were watching the scene unfold, like they couldn't quite believe what they'd witnessed. "Mr. Mitchell," Patterson said, voice carefully neutral, "we got a call about a disturbance. You want to tell me what happened here?" Cole stood up slowly, keeping his hands visible. "Officer Patterson, there was a situation. 3 men came in, started harassing Maggie behind the counter. I asked them to leave. One of them took exception to my request and took a swing at me." He touched his split lip. "I may have discouraged him from continuing." Patterson's eyes flicked to Cole's lip, then to Maggie, still standing pale and shaken behind the counter, then to the other customers, who were nodding in confirmation. He had known Cole for 3 years now, bought a dining table from him, seen him at every school event, watched him teaching his daughter to ride a bike in the park. The man was quiet, polite, kept to himself, not the type to start trouble. And then Patterson asked, and then they left," Cole said simply. "That's all. Just a misunderstanding." Patterson's partner, a younger officer named Reeves, who still had that eager look of someone trying to prove himself, stepped forward. "Witnesses say you grabbed one of them, put him on his knees. That's assault, not self-defense." Cole met his gaze without blinking, and something in his stillness made Reeves take an involuntary step backward. "I defended myself," Cole said evenly. "The situation was resolved without serious injury to anyone. I'd like to get back to breakfast with my daughter now, if that's all right with you." The cafe door opened again, and the atmosphere shifted. Sheriff Wade Hollis walked in, face flushed with fury. Behind him, supported by his companions, was Derek, still clutching his arm. "That's him," Derek said, pointing at Cole. "That's the psycho who attacked me. I want him arrested." Wade stopped in the middle of the cafe. Mr. Mitchell, my nephew tells me you assaulted him without provocation. That's a serious allegation. Cole's jaw tightened. Your nephew put his hands on me first. He put his hands on Maggie. There are witnesses. Wade's smile didn't reach his eyes. Witnesses can be mistaken, especially in confusing situations. He turned to Patterson. Take Mr. Mitchell into custody. Assault and battery. Nia was on her feet before Cole could stop her. No, she screamed. You can't take my daddy. She ran to Cole and wrapped her arms around his waist. Please don't take him away. Cole's heart shattered. He knelt down, taking Nia's face in his hands. Listen to me, he said, voice steady, even as everything inside him fell apart. I need you to be brave right now. I'm going to go with these officers and we're going to talk about what happened. And then I'm going to come home. I promise you, Nia. I promise on Mommy's name. I will come home. Nia's sobs shook her whole body. But what if they take you away like they took Mommy? Cole pulled her close, pressing his lips to the top of her head. Her tight curls brushed against his cheek, smelling faintly of strawberry shampoo and cocoa butter. Nothing is going to take me away from you, he whispered. Nothing in this world or any other. I will always come back for you. Do you understand? Nia nodded against his chest. Cole looked at Maggie. Can you stay with her? Maggie nodded immediately, gently extracting Nia from Cole's arms. They led Cole out and into a squad car. The last thing he saw was Nia's face pressed against the glass, tears streaming, small hand raised in a wave. At the station, they processed him with bureaucratic efficiency. Wade was there through all of it. The moment came in the interrogation room, concrete box with metal table and 2 chairs. Wade sat across from Cole. Let me tell you how this goes. You sign a confession admitting you attacked my nephew. You plead guilty, serve 6 months, this goes away. Wade leaned back. Or you fight it and I make your life hell. Cole's expression didn't change. There are witnesses, security cameras. Wade smiled. Cameras malfunction. Witnesses change stories. You're not from here. You think anyone takes your word over mine? Cole weighed his options. Fighting meant exposure. Questions about his past. But accepting meant Nia in foster care for 6 months with strangers. I want a phone call, Cole said. That's my right. Wade shrugged. Call whoever you want. He slid a phone across the table and Cole dialed a number from memory, one connecting to a world he'd sworn to leave behind. The phone rang 3 times. Ghost, said the voice. Familiar, authoritative. I was wondering when you'd call. Colonel Harrison Brooks arrived 2 hours later with 2 black SUVs that looked government issue, even without the plates to prove it. He emerged wearing civilian clothes, khakis, and a polo shirt like any other retiree enjoying a Saturday afternoon. But nothing was civilian about how he moved or the way his eyes swept the parking lot before he stepped away from the vehicle. 2 men flanked him, both wearing the same carefully neutral expressions of professionals who had seen things they would never discuss. Harrison Brooks had spent 35 years in military intelligence, had commanded operations on 4 continents, and had retired with enough connections to make senators nervous and generals respectful. He had been Cole's commanding officer for the last 7 years of his service, had watched him grow from a talented operator into something rare and valuable. He had been the one to sign off on Cole's honorable discharge when Simone died, and he had been the one to check in every few months, just to make sure his best ghost hadn't completely disappeared. Wade met him in the lobby, already wearing the suspicious expression of a man who sensed his carefully constructed world beginning to shift beneath his feet. Can I help you? He asked, and his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. This is a restricted area. Brooks smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. It was the smile of a man who had negotiated with warlords and walked away with everything he wanted. Sheriff Hollis. My name is Harrison Brooks. I'm here about the man you're holding in your interrogation room. He reached into his pocket and produced a business card, simple white card stock, just a name and a phone number, and watched Wade's face drain of color as he read it. I don't understand, Wade said slowly. Who exactly are you? Brooks's smile widened. I'm the man who's going to explain to you very carefully why you're going to release Cole Mitchell immediately with no charges and a sincere apology. And then I'm going to explain why you're never going to bother him or his daughter again. And if you're very lucky, Sheriff, those will be the only explanations necessary. They moved to Wade's office. Brooks sat without invitation. Let me tell you a story. There was a soldier once, one of the best I ever commanded. For 15 years, he went places that didn't exist to do things that never happened. He saved lives from threats that were never real. Wade's face went gray. Brooks raised a hand. 5 years ago, his wife died. Car accident. Something broke inside him. The only thing keeping him going was his daughter. So he retired, moved to a small town, started a business. For 5 years, it worked. Brooks stood, moving around the office. Then your nephew walked into a cafe and decided to feel big by hitting a man who wouldn't fight back. Your nephew put his hands on that soldier's daughter. And now we're here because you made the catastrophically stupid decision to protect your nephew instead of doing your job. Wade's voice came strangled. I didn't know. Brooks laughed coldly. That's the point. He set a flash drive on Wade's desk. This contains security footage, unedited, your nephew's criminal history, including 3 assault charges mysteriously dropped, and financial records showing campaign contributions from people keeping you compliant. Wade stared at the drive. Where did you get that? Brooks smiled. From people very good at getting things. The same people who, if anything happens to Cole Mitchell or his daughter, will make sure every news outlet receives a copy. The door opened. One of Brooks's men leaned in. Sir, FBI is on their way. Irregularities in the sheriff's records. Wade went white. Brooks patted his shoulder. I told you if you were lucky, my explanation would be the only one needed. Cole was released 20 minutes later. He walked out into the afternoon sunlight and Brooks was waiting. Ghost, good to see you. Cole took his hand. Colonel, I didn't expect. Brooks waved it off. You called? I came. That's how it works. FBI will keep him busy long enough for you to settle somewhere else if you want. Cole shook his head. Running isn't the answer. Nia's got friends here, school. She's already lost her mother. Brooks nodded. Then stay. The sheriff won't bother you again. I appreciate it, Cole said quietly. But I'd rather handle things myself now. He glanced back at the station, the weight of being a black father in a town that had just watched him get hauled off in cuffs pressing on his shoulders. Nia needs to see her father can solve problems without you. Brooks understood, without becoming the weapon again. He handed Cole a card. If you ever need anything. One more thing, Brooks said softly. Simone would have been proud of you. Walking away from a fight you could have ended in seconds. That took more strength than anything you ever did for us. Cole felt something shift in his chest. She would have been disappointed too for letting it go that far. Brooks shook his head. What you really are is a father who loves his daughter. Everything else is just tools. You choose when to use them. That's what matters. Cole found Nia on a bench outside Rosie's cafe, Maggie beside her. Nia's face was tear-stained and exhausted. She looked up and for a moment neither moved. Then Nia launched herself into his arms. Daddy, you came back. You promised and you came back. Cole held her tight. I will always come back. Always. Nothing could keep me from you. Maggie wiped her eyes. I'm so glad you're okay, Mr. Mitchell. Cole looked at her. Thank you for staying with her. Maggie shook her head. After what you did for me? Besides, she's great. We decided Mulan would win against any Disney princess. Cole sat on the bench, pulling Nia onto his lap. The weight of her, the smell of her strawberry shampoo, the feel of her tight curls against his chin, these anchored him, reminded him why he'd walked away from one life. Daddy? Nia's voice was muffled against his shirt. Who are you really? Cole felt the weight of the question settle over him like a blanket made of stones. He had known this moment would come eventually, had dreaded it and prepared for it, and hoped against hope that it might somehow be avoided. But there was no avoiding it now. Nia had seen too much. She deserved the truth, or at least as much of it as an 8-year-old could understand. I used to be a soldier, he said slowly, choosing each word with care. A long time ago, before you were born, I worked for the government, doing very difficult, dangerous things. Things that kept people safe, but things that also... He paused, searching for the right way to explain darkness to light. Things that sometimes required me to hurt people. Bad people mostly. People who wanted to hurt others. But still. Nia tilted her head back to look at his face, her deep brown eyes, Simone's eyes, searching his with an intensity that belied her years. Is that why you knew how to stop that mean man? Because you were a soldier? Cole nodded, his throat tight. Yes, baby, that's why. I learned how to fight a long time ago, and even though I don't do it anymore, I still remember how. It's like riding a bike. Once you learn, you never really forget. Nia's brow furrowed with the intensity of an 8-year-old trying to process information that was too big for her years. But you didn't fight him at first. He hit you and you just stood there. Why? Why didn't you stop him right away? Cole's heart clenched. Of all the questions she could have asked, this was the one that mattered most, the one that cut straight to the core of who he was trying to be. Because fighting isn't always the answer, he said softly. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is choose not to fight, even when you could win. I didn't want you to see me hurting someone, Nia. I didn't want you to think that violence is how we solve problems. He touched her cheek, wiping away a tear that had escaped down her face. But when he threatened you, when he talked about hurting you, I couldn't just stand there anymore. Protecting you is the most important thing in the world to me. More important than being peaceful. More important than anything. Nia searched his face. Mommy knew, didn't she? Cole nodded. She knew everything. She used to say I was like a dragon who decided to stop breathing fire, still dangerous, but choosing to be gentle. A tiny smile flickered across Nia's face. Daddy the dragon. She snuggled closer. Will you teach me how to protect myself? Cole hesitated. I'll teach you some things. Not how to hurt people, but how to be strong. How to walk away from fights you don't need to win. They sat as the sun descended. Nia's breathing deepened. She had fallen asleep against his chest. Cole didn't move. He just sat, watching the light change. 1 week later, Cole and Nia walked through Rosie's cafe door at 9 Saturday morning, just like they had every Saturday for the past 5 years. The bell jingled overhead, the same cheerful sound it had made 1,000 times before. But something in the room shifted as the other customers looked up and saw them enter. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Coffee cups stopped halfway to lips. The elderly couple in the corner booth lowered their newspaper. The air itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Cole guided Nia to their usual booth by the window, the one with the cracked vinyl seat that somehow nobody else ever wanted, and slid into his customary spot across from her. Everything was the same as it had always been. The worn wooden tables, the checkered floors scuffed by decades of small-town feet, the smell of fresh coffee and cinnamon rolls drifting through the air. But everything was different too, in ways that couldn't be measured or quantified. The cafe knew now. The whole town knew. The quiet black carpenter with the gentle hands was something more than he appeared. Maggie appeared at their table almost immediately, her smile brighter than it had been a week ago, her shoulders held a little straighter. There was a confidence in her step that hadn't been there before. The confidence of someone who had been reminded that good people existed, that help could come from unexpected places. The usual? She asked, and Cole nodded. The usual. As she disappeared toward the counter, Nia immediately began arranging the sugar packets into elaborate patterns on the table, a habit she had inherited from her mother. A small piece of Simone that lived on in the movements of her daughter's hands. The white and pink packets formed geometric shapes, then collapsed into chaos, then reformed into something new. Life in miniature. Daddy, Nia said, not looking up from her sugar packet architecture. Can I ask you something? Cole leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. You can ask me anything, sweetheart. Always. Nia's small fingers paused their work. Are you happy being a dragon who doesn't breathe fire anymore? The question hit Cole somewhere in the center of his chest, in the place where he kept all the feelings that were too big to examine directly. Was he happy? It was such a simple question. But the answer was anything but simple. I'm happy when I'm with you, he said finally. When I see you smile, hear you laugh. I'm happy when we make pancakes on Sunday and they turn out like weird blobs. I'm not happy all the time. Nobody is. But I have enough happiness to keep going, and every day with you gives me more. Nia smiled. That's a good answer, Daddy. Later that afternoon, they stood in the backyard as Cole showed Nia how to stand. Feet shoulder width, weight balanced, hands up. This isn't about fighting. This is about being confident. The most important thing isn't how hard you can hit. It's knowing when to walk away. Fighting should always be last. Nia dropped her hands. But what if you can't walk away? Cole knelt so they were eye to eye. Then you do whatever it takes to get safe. You kick, scream, bite if you have to. Then you run. Don't stop until you're safe. He put his hands on her shoulders. I hope you never need any of this. But if that day comes, I want you ready. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded Cole of the sunrise over the desert, they sat on the porch steps together. Nia leaned against his shoulder, her breathing slow and content, her small hand wrapped around his calloused fingers. The neighborhood was quiet, filled with the sounds of evening, dogs barking in the distance, the gentle hum of air conditioners, the occasional car passing on the main road. It was ordinary. It was peaceful. It was everything Cole had never known he wanted until he had it. Daddy, Nia said softly. I'm glad you're my daddy, even the dragon parts. Cole pressed a kiss to the top of her head, breathing in the familiar strawberry scent of her shampoo. The same shampoo Simone had used because some things were too important to change. I'm glad you're my daughter, he said quietly, even when you put too many marshmallows in your hot chocolate. Nia giggled, the sound like music, like hope, like all the reasons Cole had chosen to stop being a weapon and start being a father. There's no such thing as too many marshmallows. Mommy always said that. Cole felt his throat tighten. Yeah, he said softly. She did. They sat together as the first stars began to appear one by one in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there the world was still dangerous, still full of people like Derek who used their strength to hurt instead of protect. Somewhere out there the ghost that lived inside Cole waited in its box, patient and ready, knowing that it might be called upon again someday. But here, in this moment, on this porch, with his daughter's hand in his and the evening breeze carrying the scent of autumn leaves and the memory of his wife's smile, there was only peace. Cole Mitchell had been many things in his life. A soldier, a weapon, a ghost who moved through shadows and left nothing behind but silence. He had done terrible things for noble reasons, and he carried those memories like stones in his pockets, always present, never forgotten. But the only title that mattered now was the one Nia had given him 8 years ago in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and hope, when a tiny hand had wrapped around his finger for the first time and refused to let go. Father, it was enough. It would always be enough. And somewhere Cole knew Simone was watching. She was watching and smiling that smile of hers, the one that said she had known all along what he was capable of becoming. Not just a warrior, not just a protector, but a man who had learned the hardest lesson of all. That true strength wasn't about the power to destroy. It was about the courage to build, to nurture, to love, without reservation, and to choose gentleness when violence would have been so much easier. The dragon had stopped breathing fire, but his heart had never burned brighter.